but thanks again for everybody for joining us here. I was telling the group before we jumped on, I'm actually super pumped for this webinar, probably more so than any webinar we've done at Byte so far, mainly because it's just a topic I think that can really be helpful to people. It's something we hear all the time. People will come do a demo with Byte. They want to make a change. Maybe it's they're looking to lower their costs. They're paying for stuff they're not using, or they're paying for loans they're not doing, depending if they're on an old contract. Or maybe they're outgrowing their current system and they want more efficiency, more automation, all those sorts of things. And so they come, they do the demo, and then it's like you can almost hear it in their voice. That anxiety comes up when it comes time to make that decision of like, man, are we really going to do this? Do we really want to go through this? We know maybe for long term it's a good idea, but it's just taking that leap. So hopefully some of the transparency and the behind the scenes information and real world experiences you guys are here today maybe will help ease that anxiety a little bit. At least that's the goal here. So as Melody said, we've got an awesome team here. Mandi Feely, Executive Vice President from Premier Mortgage Resources. She's also one of their top originators. So hi, Mandi. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And then Jennifer Steinberg, AVP of Processing for Priority Financial Network. It's actually one of Byte's newest clients, just joined us last year. So thank you. And she was actually heavily involved in the implementation process as well, too. So hi, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
And thanks for being a trooper. I know your power went out with some of the stuff going on in LA there. So thanks for jumping on your cell phone and joining us here.
Yeah, not a problem.
We also have Don Green, last but not least, but Don does like 50 billion things for us here at Byte, but one of those roles is implementation specialist, kind of a master of all things Byte. She was actually the implementation manager for PFN with Jennifer's implementation, so she'll be doing the majority of it today. Hi, Don. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And I'm Bobby Palmer, marketing manager here at Byte. Hopefully I've met many of you at a conference or a future conference, so we will get going here. Hopefully like a minute or less, just for those of you that may not be familiar with Byte or haven't looked at us in many years. Very different now than it was many years ago. We are owned by CBC family of companies. We're actually celebrating 40 years this year being a business. So very strong, sturdy company. We're not going anywhere. We'll be here for the long haul. We have multiple hosting options for you. We do one-year contracts, makes it easy for you to scale up, scale down, especially as the industry changes. We actually don't feel the need to lock people into long-term contracts. We like to focus on having happy clients and kind of keep them here this way. And then we have all the features that you would think about having in an enterprise class LOS, right? Your unlimited custom screens and fields, workflows, automation, validation rules, API, multi-user editing is one that a lot of our clients really love, being able to have two people in a file at the same time. So things of that nature, and obviously all the compliance stuff. So if you have any questions on features, you can always hit me up. I'm happy to talk about that. So that's kind of what Byte is. Really quickly, I want to touch on what Byte does in terms of for our clients. The one word that pops up a lot when I talk to our clients is the word freedom, and it's that freedom to do things the way they want to do them. Everybody does things different. And so, in fact, you can see our list of clients here. This is just a few of them. I know it's a TMC webinar, so we've got many TMC lenders that are members. So Republic, Loan People, North Point, Atlantic Bay are all TMC clients. But if you look in there, you can see there's such a variety of client that could work on Byte. You've got banks, very highly, security, compliance, control focused. You've got a company like CMG that kind of wants the keys to the kingdom. They've got a huge IT staff and can really trick out the system the way they want to do everything. And then you have a company like Loan People that's, an IMB that, is very originator centric. They want it to be fast and be able to do things very quickly for their originators, but more out of the box, right? They don't have that huge IT staff. And so for them to be able to kind of use Byte out of the box after an implementation and be successful, it really kind of shows the range of clients that can be successful on Byte. So that's my little spiel as the marketing guy. Here's what we're here for. Why are we doing this webinar? We talked about it a little bit before, but really it's like you get up to that point where you want to make a change and then all these questions start popping into your head. And your home buyers kind of go through this too, right? When they're going to move, they've outgrown their home, they know, but it's like, what about the new neighborhood we're going to go to? What about the new school system we're going to be in? How is the move going to go? And so, it is hard to make that leap. And I think one of the questions we have here, I think is really important, is how is it going to affect our originators? And I love that we have Mandi on the call specifically because she can talk about it from an originator's perspective. And more importantly, is it going to be, have you gone through this before? And even if you haven't, I know you've probably heard some of the stories I've heard from different people about you go 1 year, 2 year, almost 3 years into an implementation, you really haven't got it going yet. So Obviously, that's not good for anybody. Um, from a personalization standpoint, is it going to be something where you're just kind of given best practices and say, here you go, this is how it works? Or can you really get in there and make it work for you? How much hand holding are you going to get? And in the end of the day, are you going to, the old story about giving a person a fish and having them eat that day versus teaching them to fish and having them be able to feed themselves for a lifetime. That's ultimately what we're trying to do here and make you guys self-sufficient. So, um, full transparency, some of the best practices and things that Don will go through today, it's kind of based on our middle implementation tier. We've got multiple tiers depending on your situation. So just so you know, some of the things you're going to see today are kind of based on what you're seeing here. And then how long does it take? For this kind of situation and use case, about 4 to 6 months is average, but you can really go as fast or as slow as you want, which leads us to the first question where we're going to talk to Mandy and Jennifer about their experience. So, Mandy, we'll start with you. You implemented on Byte quite a while ago, 2018, I believe. So, how did it go for you in terms of the timeline?
So the timeline was Byte will go as fast as you want or go at the pace you want. So if you're, more apprehensive about the rollout and you want to take it a little slower and you're not up against any timelines, you can absolutely do that. For me, I like to go really fast in things. So they initially, when I had talked to the team, they were like, 4 to 6 months. And honestly, I started in May was my summit integration. Jeanette came out, she handheld us through that process, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that. And then and honestly, Allison was she babied us through the process. She gave me homework. My team went to town. We did our stuff, came back to the process, and she gave us more homework. And we were able to be stood up, implemented, and in an environment that worked for our business, which was key to our partnership with Byte. Within 90 days, we were funding our first loan.
Wow.
And because I am an originator, we used one of my team's loans in order to, and my personal, as the LO, to fund that loan. So I was very much vested in that experience, but I didn't ever feel alone in that 90-day cycle. And the Byte was happy to move as fast as I wanted to move. They were kind of surprised that I wanted to go that fast. But so if you need to go slower, you can absolutely do that too. But I really wanted to get it stood up and done and move to my next project.
That's awesome. Yeah, we've talked about that a lot. And Jennifer, just going through this last year, I think you guys, if I remember right, were maybe in a situation where you kind of had to move a little quickly. So how did it go for you guys from a timeline perspective?
Yeah, we knew it was time to make a change, but like you mentioned, it was a really difficult choice, and there were a lot of options out there. And so we really took our time demoing different products and trying to vet everything as much as we could. And at the end of the day, when we finally made the decision, we had just about 4 months until our contract was ending with our current LOS. So we needed to move very fast. And, you know, we put in the effort. The team gathered round, and everybody just kind of jumped in, all hands on deck. And Dawn was my implementation specialist, and I mean, she's like my best friend now. I mean, I feel like we talked so much. And as the processing manager, I ended up being more involved than I expected to be. But it was really great because we were able to just go as fast as we wanted to. And I mean, we were able to go live um, just about 90 days after our first project plan meeting with Dawn, which also included our system analysis and that setup. And then we funded our first loan. Let's see, we went live on July 19th, and we funded our first loan August 15th. So that speaks to, being able to set up out of the box and just go and fund a loan that we were able to sell.
Well, and that's the most important part right there, right? So,
Exactly.
fantastic, awesome, thank you guys. We'll move on and let Dawn get in here and talk a little bit about. So this is kind of step one in the process. Dawn, why don't you walk us through what an implementation looks like?
Yeah, so step one in the process is really doing that workflow review and process alignment in your current environment. We really want to understand what those what those current pain points are, so that we can, as we move through the process, help you improve in those areas. But we also want to understand what's working for you today. So we want to make sure that we're not shocking your production staff with a whole bunch of changes that, they're already changing LOSs. If we can keep things somewhat the same in Byte, we will do that. We do have best practices, which we'll talk about a little bit more detail a little bit later, that can fill in gaps for you. And this process where we do a review and process alignment can either be done in person or it can be done through webinar.
Awesome. And I think, Mandi, I'll throw it back to you. I know you actually had the opportunity to have Jeanette come out, you mentioned earlier, and meet with you guys for this part of the process. How did that go?
Well, it was awesome because Jeanette is, I think Jeanette's been at Byte since, I don't know, maybe inception of Byte. I cannot speak to it for sure, but honestly, I just had a recent surgery and I was a little bit pensive about coming in and sitting in, the conference room for 4 days. And we went ahead and spent the money and did the summit integration. And I highly recommend that just because that allowed us to really dive deep into what we wanted to accomplish with our LOS. And Jeanette sat with us for 4 days and addressed any concerns we had, the ways we did our business, and her suggestions based on knowing the system. And here we are. That was 2018. And here we are in 2025. And I still email Jeanette occasionally, just, it could be anything business related. And she's just been terrific being available to me and to the company. And so for us, Byte's been a great partner that way. It's more than just an LOS to us. They've really supported us. But that 4 days was super key to ensuring success in our 90-day rollout from start to finish. And Jeanette guided us through some of the pitfalls. Maybe if you've heard, like me, when I was there, we were actually recruiting someone and I heard, well, this company uses Byte and it's slow and this and that. So I was able to ask Jeanette, hey, what do you know about that? And she said, making sure your software is stood up well, making sure your hardware is right, making sure that, you are updating your macros and staying on top of those things, making sure you're not running big dual environments, making sure you have a SQL server set up. She just gave us some really key advice that to this day has ensured our success with the system and ensured speed to close, because loan officers, I can speak that because I am a loan officer, and top 1% in the country. And so my team does a lot of loans and we like to go really fast. And that's one of the things that blue dial for loan officers is super frustrating. And the ability to, take an application on an LOS versus having to use a point of sale was super critical to us. So Jeanette really held our hands in that 4 days, and it's proven to continue 7 years later to have been super beneficial to just shut out the world and really focus on our rollout for that 4 days. So that was probably a longer answer than you needed, Bobby, but it really is. I just can't stress how important that 4-day rollout with Jeanette was and just how much the partnership has meant to us long-term for our business success.
I appreciate it and love to hear that. And no, you're great. Jennifer, I think the interesting thing with you guys is not only that, you guys just did this in the last year, but you did yours virtually. So kind of how did it go for you in terms of working with Dawn on this one?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I think it was like 2 or 3 sessions. We spent an hour or so, or believe it, like an hour and a half each time. And we broke it out and we basically walked her through a loan. And she took notes, she made suggestions, and it really was a great time to evaluate our systems as we go and find out what we wanted to bring over, what we could possibly improve or streamline, or what didn't need to come over. And just the having some outside eyes on our process was so valuable before you undertake a process like switching your loan operating system, because it's much easier to do off the ground than it is to undo.
Yeah.
And that was the main reason we were looking to switch, is because how do you wind back a system that wasn't set up properly? So we really got the proper guidance on what needed to come over, what should be tabled for now. And the virtual sessions just allowed us to move so fast. I mean, after that, we were off to the races.
Fantastic. And speaking of that next step, we'll throw it back over to you, Dawn. This is kind of step 2.
Yeah, so once we get the analysis complete, we really use that feedback to determine what your project plan is going to look like. No one lender is the same, and we understand that. And we understand that although we have a skeleton project plan that makes it very seamless as far as step 1, step 2, step 3, we also understand that these need to be tailored to meet your company where you're at, because one person needs, another person may not need. We also make sure that we do weekly updates. I personally typically like to do mine on Fridays to kind of wrap up the week. And that way to make sure that everybody is on the same page and we know, what we've been doing, what's been accomplished, and then where we're going. So those meetings kind of just cap up the week so that way we can move into the next week with not necessarily a clean slate, but definitely knowing what direction we're going in.
Yeah, that's key, keeping everyone going the same way. So this gets starts to get into a little bit of the meat of an implementation in terms of when you guys get in and start digging in and working on workflows. So maybe you can walk us through this one.
Sure. So the idea is that you guys have a designated implementation project manager, and our job is to lead you through that project and to basically kind of help keep you on track. We usually do up to 2 to 3 calls a week, and then obviously that check-in call that I talked about. We do have pre-configured workflows that are provided to you that you import and test. We can also help modify those to make sure that they meet your needs and your workflows. We do provide documentation. It's not like we just give you the imports and say, have at. We also meet with you and make sure that all of the information is, you understand what you're getting, and either how to use it or not to use it. I think the biggest thing for me is that I want to make sure that when you are done with your implementation, that you understand how to configure and customize your system. Because being self-sufficient is really going to make you successful moving forward. On top of that, we do have professional service hours that are included, and this just kind of helps alleviate, one, if you're running on a very tight timeline, like Jennifer was, she could reach out to us and say, hey, I just don't have time to do this macro, or I just don't have time to do this screen. Can your team take care of it for me? Or two, it can be used in a case where maybe you just don't have the technical expertise to complete those macros on your team. So those are why those professional service hours are there. They're really, kind of twofold, either to help you in a short timeline, or to assist you in just a lack of knowledge of being able to do those things.
And Jennifer, on that note, I'll throw it over to you. I think I'm kind of curious for your thoughts on your experience on this part of the implementation, especially having that kind of processor point of view and being involved in an implementation and having that view and that experience, being able to modify some of the stuff. How did this go for you?
Yeah, I mean, at the very beginning of our implementation, we kind of had all the department heads on the calls, which I highly recommend. Everybody should be aware the whole way through. But at the end of the day, I started pulling ahead as the ringleader of sorts, because as processing manager, I've had experience in sales and underwriting and processing, basically, open to close, and, not much beyond that, but we have a department for that. But having that knowledge of how a loan flows through is really key to configuring it properly, instead of having just an IT person saying, here's your system, and having it just not really work for your business. So the partnership of having your IT team on the calls with people highly involved in the process setup for your organization is going to make you the most successful. And I mean, to speak on the professional hours, I mean, we had a lot of systems that we had to implement. We had a point of sale, we have a proprietary intranet, we had retail, and we have retail and wholesale, and we had to launch both channels at the same time. So we were doing quite a lot. So my IT team was diverted quite a bit. So I would take a stab at a macro and I'd be like, Dawn, this doesn't work. I need a couple hours. And she'd turn around and spit it right back, sometimes within 30 minutes, which was insane. But the support is so key to being able to have a usable product at the end. And I got to tell you, it was because of this preparation and the step by step and the hand holding, we had a much better rollout.
Awesome to hear. And then Mandy, I think, from your perspective, if I remember right, being able to take that origination lens into this process and look at some of the workflows and maybe the ways you guys would want to modify those from an originator standpoint. How was this experience for you?
Well, our company really does look at originator first. Some LOS systems I think are built for the compliance and the underwriting team. So if you are those people, my apologies, but I'm just saying that you can build it however you want. It really is a great shell. Somebody asked a question, do you need a full-time admin for Byte? And I think that at least from my EVP seat, not my yellow hat, so I'm taking that hat off and being an executive vice president, looking at cost. And I know that's not the question, but I want to answer the one in the chat. Currently today, we have 400 employees and we have 3 people in our tech department, and that's for everything, soup to nuts. You got a problem plugging in your computer, they handled that. Setup of a new computer. So when we implemented into Byte, it was myself, our senior processing leader, and our tech admin, and that was it. 3 of us. And we've stayed pretty skinny on that. We don't have a full-time admin, so to speak. Now we have a team that really services our loan officers and answers those questions. But some things I wanted to address just based on the configuration and that initial setup that I found very helpful to us was custom fields. You can build a custom field based on your business model. So if there's something you do that's specific to your business, you can build an extended field. If there's something special that isn't in Byte, you can build a custom screen so that you can go through that. One of my big hot buttons as a loan officer is tracking the referral source. So we even set up a validation rule. So they have to fill that in before they can leave the home screen, because I want to know who they got their loan referred by. Something small like that can be a needle mover for your business. That was a big thing. Custom pipeline views for our loan officers. Allison took us through setting all of those up. And then the custom statuses, every company works a little bit different on status. And even though Byte gives you some ideas of what you could name things, we were able to rename those to fit our business model. And I felt like that was super helpful. And macros, validation rules, and object permissions, you can lock down certain fields so that at a certain point in the process, or a lock period. And we learned all about that during the configuration. I encourage you to get some headphones and spend some time to whoever has to set up your object permissions, because it's such a critical phase. But the suggestion I got is lock it all down and then give it to them. And they give us best practices during this phase, which was super critical to us, because it basically allowed us to say, Byte looks at these as best practices. Do these best practices fit in your business model? And if they do, you can utilize them along with the macros and the validation rules. And I went ahead and turned everything on, and then I started turning things off. And so my advice from my rollout was to shut all your object permissions down so that you don't have anything that you don't want people to see, and then start opening it back up. And then macros, validation rules, go ahead and implement what Byte gives you. They give you a lot of great things that they've learned from other companies over the past. And then you can start turning them off or changing them based on your business model.
Yeah, and on behalf of marketing people everywhere, the referred by, making that required. Thank you for that. That's when I was on the lender side for marketing, I would have loved that. So thank you. So Don, I'll flip it back over to you. So this is kind of like what Mandy was just talking about, some of the different courses and best practices and things that. So this is more like the content. Like, what do you guys get given here? So I'll let you take it over.
Yeah, so that's a great segue.
Absolutely.
We want to the pipeline views, which is more of like our reporting and workflow management. We make sure that you are trained not only in the admin section of it, but that you understand how to make reports, how to use the processing log, and also how to use your custom underwriting conditions. One of our best practice actually focuses directly on loan quality management through validation rules and macros. And we also have a really good best practice for Honda and NMLS. And basically these best practices, again, they're imports that you import into your system with documentation that we walk you through implementing. Again, we've created these best practices over a long period of time, and there is a ton of stuff thrown into these best practices. That being said, depending on your company and your workflows, you may or may not end up implementing all of it, because we're going to tailor it. We're going to help you tailor it to what works for you guys. As far as integrations go, we don't set up integrations for you or enter defaults or do anything like that. But what we do as your project manager is at the very beginning of the process, we do make sure that whatever integrations you are planning on using in Byte, that we're working on those side by side as we go through the process. Just weekly reminders on your doc vendor integration, on your credit integration, especially if you're transitioning from one vendor to another at the same time you're transitioning your LOS. So it's really important that we monitor that progress, because at the end of the day, if you have Byte set up but you don't have any of your vendors going, you can't think that you can go live. So we really kind of help you keep on track with your vendor integrations and getting those stood up and running and tested in Byte.
Perfect. And then we'll kind of take you to that. You've gone through all that. You've done all the work. You've done all the homework, as you mentioned, Mandi, and you're getting close to that time where it's like, okay, let's kind of start to transition this over to you. So Dawn, maybe talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so at the end of the implementation, and I don't want to say the end, when you get to go live, we do user training, and typically what we promote is that the people that we've worked with throughout the process and the implementation actually do the training. And we will attend that training to make sure that if they run into any brick walls or questions that they can't answer, so that they feel comfortable and they know they have a backup if they need it. But the idea is really to make sure that your team is able to train your staff for onboarding and other purposes. We want to make sure that before we close out or transition your implementation, that you have closed loans from start to finish. We're not just going to, 60 days is up, that's it, you're done. No, we do not do that. I stay with you until you feel comfortable with the system and you've closed enough loans to know that everything is working as you would expect it to be working. So for example, I know Jennifer, they went live in July, and I think we just ended up closing their project right around Christmas time, just as to make sure that I was there on a weekly basis and could be contacted through emails to make sure that, if they had any questions or they were running into any problems, to make sure that we were there to support them and that they were comfortable that to say, okay, the implementation is done, we're going to transition you off to our support team.
Thanks, Dawn. And we got about 10 minutes here before we want to leave a few minutes for questions at the end. So real quick on this one, maybe Mandi, I'll start with you. How was this process for you, kind of that handoff to your team to kind of get you guys going?
I couldn't agree more with Dawn. I mean, Allison, who helped us through that process, has become a friend of mine. I think over time she's even referred me some family members, because I am a loan officer. So I just want to say that has been important to us because there's humans that have been there a long time at Byte that are there to guide you. And even here we are 7 years later, and we decided to go from self-hosted to having Byte host us.
That's right.
And here we are 7 years later, and I think Chad and our IT director, Sal, have become best friends because they're still on the phone 7 years later. So the partnership doesn't end after that integration. I mean, I love it because I can throw ideas out and say, hey, do you have somebody that maybe created a macro around this because we found this in our system? Or do you have a validation rule that's like this? And I love that we've been able to grow with Byte. So yes, I couldn't agree more that the friendships you've made during your integration, because it is like you're getting married, man. You went from speed dating when you decide on an LOS to actually getting married, and they're in it with you, and they want to see your company succeed, which I love. And then 7 years later, here we are, and we're still in a very good partnership, making decisions and leaning on Byte to help us continue to grow our company and ensure that we're successful and protected. I think that's another critical piece. The bad guys are out there. They want to steal your company's data, and being secure, in an LOS is super critical, because without an LOS that's successful and stood up every day, I think that you're out of business, so to speak. So
Yeah.
we feel very confident in our partnership with Byte for that reason. And we've experienced both self-hosted and now having CBC or Byte host us. So if you're out there and wondering what that's like, I mean, feel free to reach out, and we can definitely visit with you on that side.
Thanks, Mandy. And Jennifer, how is this process for you, being probably relatively fresh, kind of transitioning from that training of your staff and actually getting loans closing through the system? How's that been?
I mean, it was really wonderful. We decided to train our internal staff and do, individual webinars based on the role here. So we did a couple for the loan officers, we did a couple for processors, we did underwriting, post-closing, secondary. Basically, we did those, and then we held Q&A sessions, and those I invited Dawn to, because at that point, everybody had had some time to play around.
Smart.
And she was there to answer some of the advanced questions that maybe I hadn't learned yet, which was so valuable to just have her there. And I mean, on a few of them, I didn't even get any questions that I couldn't answer. And that's all due to the support we received during the implementation. We really became the experts of our own system. And I mean, we had some big challenges with our proprietary intranet and connecting it through the API. And, getting through that, it made things a little hairy at the front. And Dawn committed to staying with us until we got the initial chunk of loans that we started in Byte, until we got them all to the finish line in one way or another, just to make sure that any potential issue that would have come up would come up, and that she would be right there to help us resolve it. And just knowing that she was there, I mean, sometimes we'd hop on our weekly call and just say, hi, I have nothing for you. Hope you have a good weekend. And but just knowing that she was there, allowed us to continue to develop after we finished our implementation. Just the support is just unmatched.
That's fantastic. And I think that's the takeaway from this particular section, is that, they do stay with you and make sure that you're comfortable, and not just, kind of send you off and wish you good luck. So I'll kind of walk through real quickly some of our post implementation support. So one of the things, I'm not sure, Donna, I don't remember if you mentioned it or not, but I'll kind of reiterate it. The sessions are recorded and then provided to you. And I think that's extremely valuable in that, one, you can go back and reference it. You're going through a lot of stuff, as Jennifer just said, during all this, and sometimes you forget. So you can go back and reference those. But more importantly, from a personal standpoint, we went through this with a different software, with a lot of the privacy stuff going on and having those cookie banners and be able to track all that stuff on our website. CBC had gone through an implementation with a vendor for that. And the people that were involved at the CBC level ended up not being here by the time it got down to us at the individual business unit. So we didn't have any of this. We didn't have a recording or documentation. We kind of had to figure out on our own, and it was painful. So to be able to have this, I think, is incredibly valuable. I think this is another one that our clients absolutely love. Once you're done with your implementation, you have access to our 100% US based live technical support. And yes, that does mean that you can actually call in and talk to a real human. And not just any human. We have an average tenure of over 10 years of our support staff at Byte. So when you call in, you get people that know Byte inside and out, and it's a huge benefit for our clients. You also have access to a 24/7 Byte community. It's got a searchable knowledge base. It's got a video library. It has access to our user guides and admin guides, which pretty much have anything you could possibly look for in Byte in there as a reference. And then, of course, as everyone has noted here, you have access to our professional services team. They can do everything from, if you do get a new Byte admin and you want to do an admin crash course, they can do that. New best practices. I think Mandy might have mentioned this earlier about doing a Byte tune-up, making sure that you're still optimizing your system, things are still snappy, you're updating your macros and things of that. So those are all services that are offered after your implementation to make sure things are going. I know we're getting close to time here. We want to make sure we have enough time for questions. So I'll just kind of ask you guys one last, in fact, Jennifer, I'll start with you, because you just, kind of went live not that long ago. From a operations standpoint and your TPO users, how have things been going since you kind of cut the cord?
As with any implementation, it's going to be bumpy at first, but the team's feeling really good about it. We did our trainings, we created training materials, But in the beginning, 90% of it was look in the help section, look in the help section. There was just articles available and guides for how to fill out this field rather than a process question. So we really only had to build out training based on our internal processes and things
Gotcha.
that made us different. The system, having that resource center of just, I mean, I refer to it frequently. That's the first place I check. When somebody asks me a question and I don't know, I go right in there and check to see if there's already a guide. And then if there's not, then I move on to the next level of support. But it's been great having that, and then being able to refer back to the recorded sessions was so helpful, especially because you're meeting twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, and not everybody's going to be there every time.
Yeah.
And being able to say, hey, so and so was out on vacation last week, go catch up, and then jump in with the homework that Dawn gave us, and it kept us on track.
Awesome. And Mandy, you've been with us for a little while now, 7, almost 8 years, I think. So how have things been going for you guys? How's your originator experience been? And how are things, just as an actual client?
Well, it's a couple things that on the loan officer side of things that I want to make sure that get shared on this call is the customer experience. We decided to go with eSign Live, and that customer experience has been awesome. I mean, if borrowers know the last 4 digits of their social and their year of birth, they can get through signing disclosures. So that's been a win for us on the loan officer side of things. I don't have to really coach them through like some other e-sign providers or e-doc providers.
Sure.
It's a little bit tricky, and they got to get access codes, and they got to know a lot of things. We've really liked that. And then the cost per unit, when you needed to be scrappy in the market, and the market giveth and taketh, I think that is just from my desk, looking at the overall cost of Byte compared to other LOS systems, the cost of the tech group, to that question that got asked about needing a full-time admin by Yvonne, I think is really important in a market that is been
Tough.
slightly bumpy over the last couple of years. So that's been important to us, looking at a cost basis. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. The 100% US based live, being able to get somebody on the phone, man, I sent an email to support and they're like, Mandy, when would you like to, do shared screens so we can look at that for you? Yeah, we can help you put that macro together if you think that, or we can walk your team through how to put the macro together and just talk through that. I've really appreciated all that. And yes, the help admin panel is super key. I don't use it so much anymore because I've been on for 7 years. I don't really need it as much. But when we first started, I'm with Jennifer. I was like, we were in that all the time. So I'm very much tracking with what she's saying. And yeah, overall, our satisfaction from all the way from loan officer's desk to our processors to secondary underwriting, closing, funding, post-close. We've really, really enjoyed our partnership with Byte, and I think that you can't go wrong. I mean, I've been in this business 30 years and been in a lot of LOS systems, and I'm happy to be on this call. I'm happy to be invited today, and I wouldn't say what I'm saying unless I really believed it. So.
And we love having you. So Melanie, you asked me to keep 5 minutes for Q&A at the end. I think we nailed it right on the dot. So awesome job, everybody. Before we do get into specific Q&As that are in the chat, I do want to ask you both one more question. And this isn't necessarily a Byte specific question. This is just more, again, we did want to have somewhat of an educational component to this webinar. So if there's someone that's on the fence, kind of considering making a change, or maybe in the process of starting to look, what advice would you have for them in terms of kind of things that maybe they should consider with their decision that maybe you didn't originally consider, or things that you looked at that you found helpful, whether it's something they're looking at for Byte or another system? Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, you want Jennifer to go first?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. I mean, my number one thing is vendors. If you're considering making a vendor switch at the same time as your LOS, I highly suggest getting that figured out and started first. It's a lot, switching an LOS is a lot. And it becomes even more when you're also switching vendors. We switched our doc system at the same time. So it was, I mean, when we're talking putting some hours in, our team really put some hours in. So if you could get that dialed in before, and then you're basically just adding usernames and passwords and setting your defaults, and then you get to move on and check your boxes and you move on to the next thing in the project. I mean, trust me, your implementation will have a lot for you to do. You don't need to be spending your time configuring and testing new vendors at the same time. So that's my number one thing.
Awesome. Mandi?
One thing maybe we didn't know and we've really appreciated is we were running a system for QM. We were spending other finances on running other systems that are intrinsic to Byte. So we've really enjoyed the TRID portion of it. It's allowed us to minimize our audits because of the cleansing, how clean the files are. And that's helped us with expenses. Obviously, being scrappy is really important to a lot of companies right now. And I just want to say that looking at the cost per unit, our cost per unit is significantly less than it was on another LOS system. So that was something that we've really been grateful for. You know, in 2020 and 21, you could spend money because you were making tons of money. But in 24, 3, 4, 5, I think that side of it can be appreciated by a lot of companies. And so for me as a loan officer, I wanted speed to close. And so I get that. And secondarily, I didn't want the blue dial. And then as an EVP of our company, I think that I can speak to that the cost savings and just, you know, the admin support that we need in our own company has been critical. So we maybe the TRID portion, we didn't really realize how important that would be and that we could have cost savings. And then now looking at it 7 years later, we're really, really grateful for the cost savings that we had. And Jennifer's right. If you are going to integrate, we decided to go with some of the integrated vendors that are already in Byte, and that made our integration easier. So if you know your vendors ahead of time, I definitely encourage you to cross-reference that so you can be assured that your vendor's already integrated. Because if you're really if they're not integrated with Byte, it can slow down some of that process for you. Because just getting the API set up, even though it's a full open API, there's still work to do.
There's some work to be done. Yeah, for sure. And we do have a vendor list. If anyone's on board and has questions, we can always send you the vendor list. So feel free to reach out to me. So I turned off my my PowerPoint here so I can go take a look at some of the questions. It looks like Mandi, you already nailed the one question that was asked earlier. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to throw them in there. But I think we are. How do you think about that timing there, Melanie? We did a pretty good job with that, eh?
Perfect. I know. Yeah. I feel like you're showing off now, Bobby.
We might have run through it a couple times to make sure. So,
right. But I feel like the discussion was really great. And as you guys were going through it, I mean, you really kind of covered all the pain points. So I really do feel like everybody that attended today, they should kind of be able to feel like you did reduce some anxiety.
Well, I can't thank Mandi and Jennifer enough. I mean, they took time out of their day to come on here and obviously had some nice things to say and share their experience. So hopefully it was helpful for everybody. Dawn, thank you as well for coming on. You're a wealth of knowledge. I always appreciate you being on. And if any of you guys that are on are going to be in Dallas for the TMC conference, would look forward to seeing you there. Come by, say hi. If you haven't registered for it yet, go ahead and register for it. If you haven't been to the conferences, the TMC conferences are one of my favorites. They do a great job. So we'll give a little shout out to you guys there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I don't see any of the questions popping in, so we'll call it a wrap.
All right, perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody
Thanks,
for
guys.
attending.
Appreciate everybody.
Thank you. Y'all take care.
Bye.